If you can only be tall because somebody's on their knees, then you have a serious problem.
So I suspected the last video where I was talking about the issues that we have to deal with in the disc golf community, the politics of it all. After doing that video, there's pretty much next to no response, which is the classic response to anything that we bring up. Anything that's important to us that will relate specifically to us is either dismissed, downplayed, ridiculed, or ignored. And that's the safe bet, to stay quiet, to stay silent in the situation, because you won't accept any responsibility or appear to accept any responsibility. You admit to nothing. And in that silence is a response. It's showing a lack of support. And in many ways, a lot of what people do when they don't say anything is that they're hoping that it will just go away. They're hoping that whatever it is that you're bringing up that might be relating to them in one particular way or in many particular ways, if they stay silent, you'll just go away. And this is what's happened in our community for as long as we can remember. Like I've said in the previous video, the disc golf community, as much as it wants to appear public and open to the whole world, it's very closed and closed-minded. How I explained it is that the disc golf community is like a public country club.
Now, maybe I'm wrong. You can tell me now or later if I've blown it up all out of proportion. I don't think so.
So back in the day when racism was starting to be held accountable in the government systems and all that, some people didn't like that. They didn't like their bathrooms being used. They didn't like their institutions being accessed by us. They didn't like any of that. They wanted to keep us out still, regardless of what the government said. So what they did was they created country clubs. So they had a right to not admit you into their environment. And in those country clubs, this is why they had golf courses and country clubs. This is why so many melanated people of the world don't play golf. And many of them didn't even know about golf, wouldn't know about golf if they didn't have TV. But disc golf is the same way. It's, instead of privately keeping people out, they're publicly keeping people out by not reaching out to our communities. And they go about this in many different ways. It's not just little to no outreach. It's the way they interact with you in their community. That's the biggest thing. People don't want to be around people who don't want them to be around them. People don't want to be around people who dismiss their perspectives, their reality. So like I said, it's not a surprise that there's no communication in this discussion. We expect it. This goes hand in hand with what I was saying before. If we want to do anything, we have to do it by ourselves. We're on our own. If anything comes up specifically towards us, they either beat it down or stay silent. Before I get into one of the responses on the last video, I'll give you an example of how this happened with one of the most beloved companies in the disc golf community, OTB. And I hate to have to put this out there, but it's facts and it relates to this storyline. So before I get into that, let me first share what happened before OTB with Infinite Discs. So Infinite Discs likes to use a particular type of art for their discs. And this goes for a lot of other companies, but in particular, this one, it's blatantly obvious and needs to be addressed. So what I said on one of their Instagram posts was something to the extent of, why are you so comfortable with putting an alien in an African headdress or an African crown, but in reality, you wouldn't even think about doing this with the British crown? Why are aliens connected so much to our history? Why is it so easy for you to put, and how we see it, downplay our history and in many ways rewrite it? This stuff is being shared on mainstream media television, Ancient Aliens on the History Channel. These are things that we address in our community that go along unchecked in their community because they don't listen, nor do they give a fuck. So I had enough with it, being in the disc golf community for, at that time, I don't know, 3 years, something like that. I have seen the art that they've been putting on there. And at this point, I had had enough because this was the third, fourth, or fifth time that I had seen this. So just that little comment, why are you so comfortable with putting alien faces on African headdresses, but you wouldn't do that with a British crown? Just saying that got me blocked on Instagram from Infinite Disc and zero response. This is how they respond. That's a whole ass disc golf company. Infinite Disc did that. So what happens? They dismiss your perspective. They write it down. Don't give a fuck about anything that you're saying and erase you from the narrative. Erase your perspective from the conversation. Never to be seen, never to be heard again. I can't even look at their page. So boom, that happens. All right, whatever. We're used to shit like that. Put it on the shelf, leave it. Here we go again. This time on OTB's website. Same company, Infinite Disc, puts out a disc with an Aztec headdress and a monkey face on it. Of course, they write it off. Oh, this is just art. We just do this. At this point, it's a trend. And since I first saw it on OTB's website, I'm going to leave a comment on OTB's website. And that comment shared something to the extent of the same thing I said before, and even reference what I said before. Why are these companies so comfortable with it can be taken to disrespecting our history, our ancestors? In light of art and everything, you could see it as, yeah, this is just art. It's not disrespect. That's from your perspective, though. Why is our perspective never taken seriously? Why is our perspective always secondary to the mainstream perspective? Which is what perspective makes you comfortable.
I remember a review of Sula in which the reviewer said, this is all well and good, but one day she, meaning me, will have to face up to the real responsibilities and get mature and write about the real confrontation for black people, which is white people. As though our lives have no meaning and no depth without the white gaze. And I've spent my entire writing life trying to make sure that the white gaze was not the dominant one in any of my books.
See, your comfort comes before our discomfort. So if we share our discomfort, even if you're not uncomfortable, just our discomfort is a threat to your comfort. So our discomfort doesn't matter. In fact, it has to be swept under the rug, washed away, put away in order to maintain your comfort. Our story makes their situation uncomfortable. So our perspectives have to be dismissed. They have to be deflected upon. So I wrote out a fairly long paragraph about how I feel about that situation. Why are you so comfortable with disrespecting our ancestors? Why are you so comfortable with doing this? Even one step up from that. Take it away from disrespect. Take it from just, if we're uncomfortable with it, why do you keep doing it? Secondly, and this is what I brought up in the comment on Infinite's page, why are you so comfortable with doing this with our ancestors, but you won't do it with your own? It seems disrespectful if you put an alien inside an English or a British headdress. They know that. They feel that. They won't do that. But they feel real comfortable with doing that with our people. See, none of that matters at all. And I referenced that in the comment. I said, look, I've had an interaction with Infinite Disc before with this same issue. On their disc, they put an alien in an African headdress. Here we go with Aztecs with a monkey face on it. And with the history that so-called white people have, with how they interact with us and our history and our people, you should be treading so fucking softly on that trail that anything close to offending something that close to us, something that matters that much to us, should really be taken into account. You should really see it from that perspective, but they don't because they don't care. They can't see outside of what they just give a fuck about. They don't care about what you think, how you see. It's all about them and their bottom line. If they got to use you to make money, they will. If it pisses you off, they don't give a fuck. So in that comment, I said, look, this is the second time that I've seen this. I don't see anybody talking about it. This is something that our community has had to deal with in the past in other ways. It's still happening in other communities in other ways to this day. And in those communities, the same thing's happening. Nobody's saying anything about it. So what do you think happened? I posted that comment and OTB deleted it. And what you're looking at right now are the comments that were put up right after they deleted my comment. They're talking specifically about the stamp. I mean, I looked at the disc, first of all, because at that time I was bagging the Aztec. I was bagging that disc. I loved that disc. So to see it in glow, I was like, oh man, I'm going to get this disc. And sure enough, I looked closely and it just wasn't vibing. It's not right. There has to be a point. There has to be some kind of accountability in this situation. We're not going to stand for this shit anymore. Other people might just say I'm I don't give a fuck about what you're saying about this overreaction, because this is not an overreaction in relation to what happens in real life outside of the disc golf community. This is a trend. This is something that happens outside of the disc golf community constantly in many different ways. And here we go again. Like I said, to move on to the next point. Dismissal, deflection, and outright disrespect. If you were to ask me, these two comments are a direct reaction to the comment that I left. And if that's the case, then they not only give a fuck about what you're saying, they are adamantly against what you're saying. They will keep you from saying what you're saying if they're approaching it from these kind of perspectives. So this is how we get dismissed. This is how they deflect. This is how they silence where we're coming from. Now, on to the recent video that I put out and the response, or the lack of response, from the disc golf community, even the local disc golf community. Because you can see what kind of traffic goes to what kind of posts. You can see what's normal. You can see what's abnormal. The like to view ratio, even on YouTube, is completely different. The comment to view ratio on Facebook is noticeably different. And that's just the analytics, so I'll leave that. I just had to put that out there. But looking at this, you would expect something as important as what we're bringing, because it's important to us. This is a big deal. Something as critical as this discussion is being brought up to the community. Because this is not something that just, I'm just talking about this because I'm angry. No, I'm not some angry black dude. That's the trope that they put onto us all the time. He's just angry and we're just out here. No, not going to happen. And to be honest, that's kind of what was being alluded to in the one comment that was left on the video that I just posted. And I'll get into that in a second. So I don't have Facebook. I just do YouTube and Instagram. And a friend of mine at my home course decided to repost the video that I made on our disc golf club. Well, it's not even really a club. We don't really have a club. We're just friends who play disc golf. But we have a Facebook page because we do events and we do all kinds of, we're organized. We just don't do all the club shit. We just take care of each other and play disc golf. So on that Facebook account, he posted my video. Outside of all the controversy with the subject, you would think with the subject in general in such a small community that this discussion would be more engaged with, more engaging, maybe even than most, but at least discussed because of the intensity of it. But like I said before, that's not what we expect. We expect silence. We expect deflection. We expect dismissal. And this is exactly what has happened. So, 2 comments on that Facebook post. One of them was from a very known disc golf legend in many different ways, Leonard Muse. Designed so many disc golf courses, operates a mobile disc golf store, does a lot for the disc golf community. This is what he had to say in response to the video that I put up. Let me try to get through this without going too far. Agree that disc sports haven't been as inclusive as we could have been. Okay, on the positive end, thank you for acknowledging that. But in our perspective, that's downplaying it, criminally downplaying it. Because the way I presented it in the video was extremely impassioned and had very many examples of how that exists in this community. Not only in this community, but in the whole damn world. But in this community, I went into detail in how this exists. So to say that, yeah, we haven't been as inclusive as we could have been, what are you actually saying? So you're acknowledging what I'm saying, but the way you're acknowledging it is actually downplaying the way I presented it. Because we're not just saying, oh, we would like inclusivity. No, that's not what we're talking about. It's so much far beyond inclusivity. That's no different than back in the civil rights time frame. What we were bringing to the table is stop killing us. Stop genociding our people. Stop poisoning. Stop blowing up our churches. Stop doing. And then what they said is, oh, what it sounds like is you guys are looking for equality. You guys want some equality? All right, we'll give you equality. Here's some civil rights. That's the same thing. It's no different than what I said, how I bring it in the last video for somebody to say this. It's no different than we're bringing, hey, they're lynching, burning us, eating us, making shoes out of our skin. They're making laws, they're redlining, they're creating systems where their people are very successful and our people are very much down in the dirt and kept from prospering. We're bringing all that to the table and somebody says, let's just give them equality. No, it's not from your perspective. We're not asking for inclusivity. We're not asking for equality. So to say inclusive is to dismiss the depths of where we're actually coming from. Like I said, I'm not going to hold back on this response because if Leonard went into the trouble of making all of this, I'm going to break it down because like I said, to just comment and not reach out, he has my phone number. To just comment and not reach out, who's he actually talking to? Who does he want to be heard?
You could feel the address of the narrator over my shoulder, talking to somebody else, talking to somebody white. I could tell because they're explaining things that they didn't have to explain if they were talking to me. It was that. It's profound for me.
And like I said, I don't want to make it seem like he shouldn't have said anything. What I'm saying is that sometimes what you say is not actually what you're saying. And sometimes what you say doesn't even need to be said, especially if you haven't said that directly to the people that it needs to be said to. And we get real comfortable with this online stuff. I'm not an online guy. Especially with issues like this, something like this. Leonard is local. Leonard lives down the street. This is not somebody from across the world, across the country. So, like I said, I thank Leonard for putting this out there. But we got to get to the nitty gritty here. This is not something to be taken lightly. I don't want to make this video too long, so let me try to go real quick. So he says, agree that social and economic structures tend to persist over time in any endeavor. Specifically, who participates and who benefits doesn't change much, even as the scale increases. So he's acknowledging that there is a socioeconomic difference between one community and our community. And the disc golf community is a shrunk down scale of the larger issue that's going on. I might be reaching a little bit by saying that's what he's saying, but I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. That's how I see what's being said.
You may be right. Maybe I'm over-dramatizing the whole question, which was innocent enough because the problem of being free to write the way you wish to without this other racialized gaze is a serious one for an African American writer. Very serious.
He goes on to say, most folks, and myself included, are not very good at breaking out of their regular social circles to effectively embrace other folks. Let me reword that. Wow. White people like myself are not very good at breaking out of our white social circles to effectively embrace other people who are not white. I told you I'm not going to beat around the bush. This is what's being said. This shit needs to be addressed directly. We're not trying to indirectly talk about, we're not asking for equality. We're not asking for inclusivity. It's so much more complex than this. So in order to get to the real issue, we have to speak on the real issue. So he's basically saying with that, we know we don't reach out to you. We know that we have our community and you have your community. And we know this. This makes us uncomfortable. So we just avoid you completely. He goes on to say, being ineffective in this regard doesn't make us greedy or selfish. So, the way he said what he said is a downplaying. The follow-up sentence of being ineffective, meaning not reaching out, not talking to you, downplaying your perspective, in this regard doesn't make us greedy or selfish. So what does he do? He turns him and himself, his people, his community, what he just acknowledged, he turns them into the victim. And if they're the victim, then who's the aggressor? Exactly. So he's basically saying that I'm calling them greedy and selfish. No, that's not what was said in the video. You could see it from that perspective if you want to play the victim, but that's not what was said. That's a form of downplaying. That's a form of deflection. Don't talk about the issues. Make yourself the victim. And if you make yourself the victim, it's another form of dismissing and downplaying, because once people see that and they feel victimized, they're like, yeah, you know what? We're not greedy. We're not selfish. When they take that tone, when they take that perspective, they no longer give a shit about what the other people are saying. Why? Because now they're in the right. And if they're in the right, then you're in the wrong. So if he, who is an authority in the disc golf community, is right, and this is in the first few sentences of his comment, if he's right, you're wrong. And it only takes that little bit of authority to make it that way. So he says, being ineffective in this regard doesn't make us greedy or selfish. I already talked about that. It's not a personal thing. We're not saying you're personally being greedy or selfish. No. This is an institutional issue. It's not dealing with certain people. So the people are the symptoms to the cancer. We are talking about the cancer. That video that I brought up is talking about a cancer, not only in this community, but in all communities around the world. But since I am in this community, I will speak on it in reference to this community. So no, greed and selfishness pertains to individuals. Yeah, you could stretch it and talk about companies being greedy and selfish, whatever. But when you say selfish, you're talking about people. And if you're combining selfishness with greediness, you're talking about selfish and greedy people. No, we're talking about the institution, the mindset. So he says, being ineffective in this regard doesn't make us greedy or selfish, just means we need to learn how to do things better. So, somewhat acknowledging a wrongdoing, but really just glazing it over and hiding it under, well, you know, we do bad things, we're going to do better. Just the same way politicians talk all the time. You know, we're going to do better. You know, the Democrats did terribly this time, and, you know, we're Republicans, we're going to do better. It's the same story we engage with all the time. And in that, what happens again, like I said, dismissal, deflection. And once again, who's the victim? You're calling us bad. So I'll acknowledge it and say we have to do better. We're gonna do better. But you're calling us bad. So I'm not saying that we're bad because we're bad. I'm acknowledging that what you're saying in reference to us being bad, I'm acknowledging that that's kind of true. But the bigger part of the issue is that, everybody fucks up. We'll do better. Dismissal. So anyway, his next approach. I think 95+% of all the organizational energy ever put into disc golf has been motivated by creating more fun for local players. Very little of the motivation, in my experience, has been focused on anyone's bottom line. When something like this is said, after the supposed acknowledging of everything else that was said, it just dismisses, it just completely erases all of everything else that you just said. Because that approach not only downplays where I'm coming from, dismisses, deflects from the responsibility that needs to be taken by these institutions for acting the way they have been, which you kind of acknowledged earlier, but are really saying that there's no wrongdoing by saying 95+% are just trying to have a good old time. We're just trying to have fun, man. Once again, what does this do? He's playing defense in that response. So if you have to defend yourself, that means you're not the aggressor. You didn't do anything wrong. You're the victim. Again. We're just trying to have fun. What are you talking about with all this racism and downplaying and lack of this and lack of that? Come on, man. We're just trying to have fun. At least 95+% of us, which is pretty much 100%. You gotta agree with me there. What about that last 5%? Let's take your numbers, for example. Five for that last 5%. What are they doing? And that last 5%, mind you, makes up the majority of people who push and move product, move money around. It's no different than the politics. It's the top less than 1% of people in the world who are making the decisions for the rest of the world. They're the ones that's what's controlling the movements and the livelihood of that other 99.9, or what you're saying, the other 95%. Yes, 95% of the people who play, they just want to have fun. I get that. But is that at all acknowledging or even dealing with what we're saying? No, it has nothing to do with what we're saying. It has everything to do with somebody who's trying to defend themselves by downplaying the situation. And like I said before, presenting the argument that they're the victim. So as before, this is a way of writing the narrative, controlling the dialogue, downplaying. Because when you add what this comment says, plus the weight that is carried by that individual, who, like I said, is a legend in the community, that weight, plus what's being said, which is largely downplaying, dismissal, victimization, and little to no acknowledgement of the depths of what was actually being said in the video. That plus the weight of that individual pretty much completely dismisses what was being said at the heart of the issue. Because who am I? Like I said, it's already been set up. You're the angry black dude. This is how it is in the mentality of the people, how they see us when we bring up these issues. Oh, here we go again. They've done it with our women too. The angry, the emotional, the violent black woman. We've been typecast as that. So you could argue, and it wouldn't be a stretch, that this response is responding to that trope. Responding to the idea of being attacked. It wasn't an attack. So, to finish, at least on this part. Very little of the motivation in my experience has been focused on anyone's bottom line. So he's speaking of the community. He's saying that from his perspective, from in his experience, people don't really care about the bottom line. They're just really focusing on the fun for local people, which, as I said in the video, is not true at all. Talk to the pros. What are the pros saying? What do we see with our own fucking eyes? What do we see? We see them only investing in money, things that produce money, people that produce money, at the expense of these local players that he referenced in this comment. We're the ones paying for that shit. We pay for the tournaments. We pay for the discs. We pay for the apparel, all the shirts and the hats and the bags and all. We buy all that shit. We fund everything. Is that work being reinvested into us? Absolutely not. As I said in the video, it's invested in the bottom line. So he goes on to say, there's more money circulating in the sport now than ever, which definitely opens up opportunities, maybe even obligations, for broadening the base of participation. So maybe now that the sport has more money, maybe now we might be obligated to do something in regards to what you're saying in your videos. So, maybe we have some responsibility there. Maybe. That maybe is another form of dismissal, deflection, and downplaying. Because I didn't bring up any maybes. We're not bringing up any maybes. We're bringing up specifics. Wrongdoings at the heart of it. Maybe we should stop genociding your people. I'm not taking it there, but this is what I'm saying, how it's compared to. Like I compared it to the civil rights. They're blowing up our churches, setting people on fire, lynching people, dragging people's bodies behind cars with ropes, having barbecues with our people, taking body parts, putting them on display, feeding babies to alligators, and they think we're talking about equality. You think we want equality? You should be happy we're not looking for fucking revenge. But we're not that type of people. Even though you've tried to present us as such, we're not that type of people. So we're not asking for maybes. This isn't a maybe situation. We're not talking about maybe things were done wrong. No, we're saying specifically, yes, things were done wrong. And like I said before, for somebody who carries that kind of weight, to say maybe you're on to something, it looks like they're saying that like they're agreeing with you and acknowledging what you're bringing to the table. But when you really look into it and really break down the verbiage, that's not the case. Because the way they see it, the way they read it, they're going to focus from the victim perspective. Like I said, keep that in mind. That's how the tone was set in the beginning of this comment. And to make it clear, this is in response to people who have been saying in many different ways that we've been victimized. Now, I'm not saying that we're the victims, but you can have been victimized. And that needs to be addressed in order to be stopped. So if I brought that to the table, why are you victimizing yourself? Like I said, this is going deep into the psychology of how this all works. This is how I do on my channel. This is how I do as a person. So I'm going to take it there. People who do not know how this fits in their world or their perspective, they might see it as overreacting or whatever it is that makes them more comfortable with the situation. That's fine. I understand that. I see how that works. But it doesn't take away from the reality of the situation. So maybe even obligations. Maybe we should even do something about it now that they have more money. Just maybe though. So that maybe is heavy, because maybe says, yeah, we fucked up. We maybe should have done better, but we're good people, so we didn't really do anything wrong. Like I said, there's no acknowledgement in this, but it appears as if there is. Then he goes on to say, besides being the right thing to do as humans, it's probably good business too. It's true that the level of play would be higher if we had the best athletes from every nation, class, race, ethnic group. It doesn't make sense to me that folks currently underrepresented, black people and so on, and it doesn't make sense to me that black people currently, let me just read it straight up and then I'll reword it. It doesn't make sense to me that folks currently underrepresented would be way disproportionately successful as suggested. So, first off, it wasn't suggested that we would be more successful, because I didn't suggest that as a potential. It's a proven fact in sports. This is why I was talking about specifically the history of professional sports. It's a proven fact. And in fact, this is the reason why we were kept out of sports. Because they needed their glory. They needed to be the center of attention. This is not my opinion. This is a proven fact. When we fully invest ourselves into something new, specifically a sport, it is then taken over by us. This is not an ego trip. This is not this. This is not that. Whatever you want to call it. It is historical fact. And to even say what he said, the way he said in this comment, shows a sense of fear in there. As I said in the video, they are scared to fucking death of their sport being taken over by us. I am not holding back from that. They are scared shitless because they do not have anything else for themselves, and they need to have things for themselves in order to feel big around people who naturally make them feel small.
If the racist white person, I don't mean the person who is examining his consciousness and so on, doesn't understand that he or she is also a race, it's also constructed, it's also made, and it also has some kind of serviceability. But when you take it away, I take your race away. And there you are, all strung out, and all you got is your little self. And what is that? What are you without racism? Are you any good? Are you still strong? You still smart? You still like yourself? I mean, these are the questions. It's part of it is, yes, the victim, how terrible it has been for black people.
But you don't like that.
I'm not a victim. I refuse to be one.
And the victim is the other person who is morally inferior and
That's
who
that's a
has
serious
to hold
question.
on to
Of course.
racism
If you
to
have to
somehow
hold, that's
for his or her own self-esteem and definition.
If you can only be tall because somebody's on their knees, then you have a serious problem. And my feeling is white people have a very, very serious problem. And they should start thinking about what they can do about it. Take me out of it.